Long time no see, Exiles. Life's been a little busy, but I've still been playing the game, I've still been working on the build, and yes, I have a very late in League build guide update for you. We're going to start with a couple tips and tricks, mostly about how to solve some of the outside issues in ways that weren't quite obviously available to us at the start of League, and also some of the things I've done that have pushed the DPS to, honestly, levels that I really have never experienced on any build. Not because this build is like the greatest thing ever, but honestly because I always play my own stuff, and usually it doesn't get this powerful. First things first, some basics about the build and what I'm using. I have a basic weapon here. It's 92% minion damage from the Essence, cast speed roll, +1 all physical spells, skill gems fractured, 40% Ela damage implicit, and then of course our trigger craft. And some strength, which is actually very useful. It's not a great weapon, I can do a lot better. I'm not really rushing into an upgrade yet because an oscillating scepter will let us remove these 3 points from the tree and invest them elsewhere, and that will be probably our absolute best option going forward. Another big thing I plan to do at some point is upgrade these gloves. As you can see, they have minion damage, which is kind of nice, but more or less what these do is they give more armor than the Nexus gloves, right? It's less constraining to craft on them also because you can get a fractured base. We don't use Nexus gloves anymore. If you're not aware why, we have a Clarity Watcher's Eye that gives us a chance to recover 10% of mana when you use a skill. We have a Mastery that does the same thing. And then we have an Amulet mod with Essence of Insanity doing the same thing again. As you can see, my amulet's mostly fixing dexterity. I've got another fractured base to give me that guaranteed +1 level of physical skill gems. If you're not getting these +1 levels of physical skill gems, or +1 all gems, whichever it may be, you're going to start to feel it as far as like juicing maps is concerned. You really want to push the build in that regard. And I say that because one thing that happened that I really wanted to get done before I made the next update video is my Unearth is now level 26. It's level 26 because it is level 21 baseline. I have +1 level here, +1 level here, and +3 levels from this, level 4 in power. I honestly, part of me kind of hates recommending this because it's such an expensive item. I think this was 15 Divine Orbs, but at some point, and you're going to have it an expensive item in the build. I didn't need this for the longest time. I only just got it today, and honestly, I would say you could get this last, but if you're able to get it early, it's going to have one of the biggest impacts on your clear, and the same goes for the level 4 Enhance, which increases the quality, and of course quality on Unearth increases our corpse life. As you can see, I have 44% there, another 10% on the tree, 54% more damage. Yeah, that's what it is. It's 54% more damage on the corpse explosion. It's a pretty big stat to have, like, going in, also considering we're just trying to get the most out of this 4-link setup. Obviously, Arcanist brand with Desecrate carries us through the big stuff. As you can see, I actually don't have Runebinder spec'd into right now, and it has not really been hurting me. It seems like you really only need to get the one brand on it if you're running Spell Cascade. If I wasn't running Spell Cascade, I would say this is mandatory. And it would feel a little clunkier too, so that's something to keep in mind. Of course, we're going through things a mile a minute. There's a lot to talk about yet. Some big ones. If you do everything I've recommended for block and getting that set up in the build, you'll notice you're actually about 3% short unless you get higher modifier values of increased effective offering on your boots and chest. That's one option. Another option, if you can get the extra strength to fit it, is you can go ahead and use tattoos on these strength nodes here. And that gives me the extra 3% I need to get there. You can use that as well. Very easy to hit block and spell cap with that, and the rest of the nodes on your tree allocated, assuming you have that minimum 12% chance to block spell damage suffix on your shield. Some additional details, which I think I've already gone over, but are now actually in practice. Elemental weakness is in my weapon. Wave of Conviction is out. We are getting our exposure from Awakened Fire Penetration being at level 5. That's 10% chance on hit. I'm also running the exposure you inflict applies at least minus 18% to the effective resistance, so it's a pretty good value exposure, even though it's the baseline 10% from Awakened Fire Pen. And then on top of that, we allocate Whispers of Doom. So now we have a double curse setup with Bone Offering, which is a very, very significant bonus to our overall damage. This is kind of hard to do though. You need to have your Anoint opened up, and if you don't have, say, a shield and some other source of reduced extra damage from critical strikes taken, you're probably still anointing Sanctum of Thought. And do not get away from this before you're ready, because the defense in this build is going to feel unreliable if you're taking big critical strikes. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately. Big critical strikes ruin everything. Like everything. You can be completely indestructible or nearly dead for as much as 50% of the damage getting through. And it'll happen completely at random, and it'll make you question things in a bad way. Honestly, it's not good for the build. I can't recommend anything more than to get that solved as quickly as possible. 80% at that point at least is going to get you through maps just fine. But there can be some situations where a boss surprises you, like even through Molten Shell, which is not great, because with Molten Shell up, we can tank pretty much most of the slams as long as it's not a true one-shot. All of that said, we should probably get into the biggest upgrade I can suggest to you for less than 5 Divine Orbs that is kind of currently available in the game right now, and it's this right here. If you've seen this, you're looking at it, you're like, oh, he's got some sort of a recommendation for a Timeless Jewel, maybe something giving double damage. No, this is the Perandus Pact, giving fire damage. This is a very dense cluster of skill points, and I would honestly say there might be a Timeless Jewel that is actually stronger than this. But this was 3.8 divs, which is not a lot of money, all things considered, especially this late in the league. And now all of these are giving 6% increased fire damage. If you count that out, it's 17 passives. 17 times 6 is a big number. Yes, it's more than 100. That's more than 100% damage for a single jewel socket. That's really good. I don't think I need to tell you that's really good. That's just really good. It's the same reason we do this with the Ignite, with Combustion and everything. And actually, I need to talk about Combustion and Ignite, because on some of the live streams, I've talked about a potential support gem switch, in which we get rid of Combustion and this Mastery node, and what we do is we switch to Awakened Ela Focus, and we just kind of cut out the Ignite, because we have so many sources of penetration, resistance reduction, and just increased damage in general that at a certain point, Awakened Ela Focus will surpass it. I'm still not there. Even if I got the gloves mod with this jewel, it might be a very small, tiny marginal bonus. But even so, I'm actually starting to rethink this, that maybe Combustion is actually just going to be the top long term. Which is nice, because it's a lot cheaper than an Awakened Ela Focus. But yeah, it's going to be close. There might be a point where I have everything optimized where Awakened Ela Focus ends up being like 10% more damage, and at that point I would do the switch. But I think I'm quite far from there. I would need to have the gloves. I need to have the Awakened Ela Focus at level 5. That's another thing, because it would need to be giving me the level to detonate Dead of Chain Reaction. And I would probably even need a +4 helmet, just because every 2 levels... This is kind of why Awakened Ela Focus comes into the conversation at all. Every 2 levels increases that explosion-based fire damage by 0.1%. Which isn't a lot, but it is enough to see like the same damage and know that actually it's a little bit more. So that's a very big min-maxy thing that I'm still kind of on the fence about. I just wanted to talk about it because I have mentioned it in live streams. As far as improving the damage to like beyond what it's currently at, well, I think the first thing we need to do is actually show what the damage is at. I have some boss fights lined up, so I'll go ahead and just kind of rattle off a few kills real quick to show you what the build's doing now. As a forethought, the build's DPS is actually great. We've been doing Formed, Forgotten, all the other basic Maven stuff like the Elder Slayers, and it's crushing through all of them no problem. We're really not even ever getting it to a point where we drop below half HP during it. Part of that is obviously operator skill. If you stand in everything, there's still a chance you will die. I'm sorry, we're not that tanky, but we are killing everything so quickly that it doesn't matter. I did Cortexes earlier today, one with Maven, one without, and the one with the Maven had 62% increased life, 64 I think, and that still cut through the bosses so quickly that they didn't get to fight. That's way more DPS than I ever anticipated for this build, definitely more than I was getting in Affliction, and I have to attribute that to the Arcanist brand tech, because quite frankly, everything else in this build should be slightly worse, minus maybe the Perandus Pact. Perandus Pact, I think, kind of makes up for everything we lost in Affliction, because we had a lot of corpse life scaling there. And now that we have this, yeah, we're back. We're back from the League mechanic. This is an incredible pickup, I have to say. It is so good. So I'm going to let the dog back into the house. Right. I'm going to kill some bosses for you. We'll talk a little bit more after that.
Quickly!
So yeah, that's where the build's at right now. It's sweeping everything. It's never dying. I'm 31% of the way through 98, and I've killed, I think, 10 bosses and then like 4 different higher tier Maven invitations. Just nothing has even remotely scratched the build. The tank ability was always good, but that kind of was designed around the idea that we needed to be tanky enough to deal with all incoming threats, because we would have to deal with them. And we kind of don't have to deal with them very much anymore. We have that buffer zone where the DPS is actually high enough that things die quite quickly. So I'll just run through it again real quick. The upcoming upgrades for the build, most certainly a new weapon, one that gives me these 3 skill points back. Probably something in the vein of a chilled or increased enemies taking or you deal extra damage to enemies who are chilled mod on gloves. That one's probably going to be very difficult because I feel like to craft a good one, I'm going to want to fracture it, and that's potentially a massive investment to get that together. I don't know how much one costs pre-fractured, but I'm sure it's absurd. Additionally, obviously 2 skill points to pick up. I have some nodes on the tree that I'm not terribly in love with. Like, I'm picking up these, and I won't lie, I am actually quite in love with it because increased effect of non-damaging ailments is really good, because that's shock effect. It's 50% damage across 3 points, which is all right. It's 6% all res, which, believe it or not, I actually kind of need. Not like desperately. I could drop it and I'd be fine, but it just makes you feel a little better. And then the mastery is quite nice as well. I'm not sure if that's the best. There are plans maybe for cutting out this entire section of the wheel and pathing through here and getting reduced cost through tireless, and also grabbing this, and then the mastery for physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage. That would theoretically jump our max hit, like our physical max hit, by somewhere in the 15% range, which is pretty major at this stage of the build because we already handle physical max hits quite well. All of that said, you've seen where the build is at, how we're kind of getting along. Probably the most important thing out of this video that you can take away from it is get this jewel, get it before the price rises. Actually, I think the price has gone up and then come back down already, but get this jewel. That is so much fire damage for 2 skill points. I can't even begin to... There are people getting cluster jewels who are seeing this and they're like, no, I had to work hard for that. Not fair. You know, they get that, what is it, the eye level 83 or whatever on a 12 point, and you have to roll effect and all those other important stats to give the... No, you can just get that right now. And it's pretty fantastic because our points are already so dense right here. Like, we are really applying stuff. This actually, like, boosts the value of this, which I think is great because I feel like it's hard to convince people to spend these 4 points. I've seen so many people come in who don't have this, and they're like, well, you know, it feels like I die too easily. And I'm like, do you have recoup? And no, they don't. And they often don't have the mastery either, which, even if you only have this, please get the mastery. It helps so much. It makes your recoup 33% more effective over baseline. It's a big deal. Anyway, I have some more upgrades to get yet. I think I want to take this build into Ubers. I probably am going to showcase T17s the next time I run this because, quite frankly, I've already done a couple and it wasn't that bad. And with some of the upgrades I've made to it, I'm sure I could sweep it now, honestly. I did a Sanctum, which is Lycia, and my buddy was in the party and my internet was going crazy. And that's actually in one of the more recent archived live streams. You can find that in the playlist. I should actually put the live stream playlist down in the description. I'll do that too. You can find that there somewhere. I'm not exactly sure which one it was. It's not the one that says T17s, because that one's like a week old. And I was actually able to get through it a week ago. And if you haven't done it, this isn't really advice for the build, but it is advice in general. This is a big deal, having the 5th point in the map device. Oh my goodness, did GGG make a mistake by hiding unlocking this behind T17 completion? Because there's a lot of people who have builds that just, for one reason or another, it's incredibly cumbersome to do this. And this is so important for farming. Like, my farming throughput has gone up massively since getting this, just in T16 in general. So get on that. You know, use your all flames. Probably better than I do, because as you can see, I'm not very good at that. There is one more thing to say. Good guy Galif comes into the stream chat quite often, talks about how they're playing the game. They're doing something very different with the build. It's more of a glass cannon variant, where instead of this very beefy chest piece to give us huge amounts of survivability, they have Diala's Malefaction. Now, this body armor, which I don't think I have one of, gotten rare because people keep using it. This body armor allows you to juice up the effects of your individual gems, both the primary skill and the supports. And he has a level 32 Unearth with 84% corpse life. That's a very different story from the 26 with 44% I have, or 54%, I guess. It would be 74 on the gem. That's a tremendous amount more damage from the corpse that you're generating with Unearth. And the reason I'm bringing it up, because it's almost hard to recommend it because of how much survivability you lose by getting rid of this. Every piece of gear in this build is kind of a cornerstone of the defensive layers we set up. So it's any piece getting changed kind of gives me pause and I really have to think about it. That said, if you're in solo Self-Found and you have a Diala's Malefaction, going the glass cannon route might not be the worst thing in the world, especially if you're savvy enough to fix the survivability elsewhere, because that's kind of a lesser investment and that's going to give you a lot of damage. There's no way around it. It's something to keep in mind. He's definitely doing higher DPS than me. I would assume he's not surviving as well as I am, but I guess I'd have to take an in-depth look at the POB. I should have asked to do that, you know? I gotta do my due diligence. Now, I'm very certain that the survivability in my version of the build is one of the top ways to do it. There's definitely some changes I can make that will boost it. Like I said, I even talked about this already over here. The armor value is pretty good. 23k with flasks. With these other nodes over, though, it would go much higher. I think it's actually like 24k without the flask active. A massive increase. So yeah, that's all. Have a good one, Exiles.